What if I told you that the person smiling at your success is the same one quietly plotting your downfall? Stay with me, because what Carl Jung uncovered about envy and emotional energy will fundamentally change how you understand every relationship in your life. Carl Jung said that people cannot tolerate too much reality. And nowhere is this more painfully true than when an empath's natural light exposes the darkness someone else is desperately trying to hide. You see, most people think jealousy is loud. They picture outbursts, obvious hostility, open competition. But Jung's research revealed something far more unsettling. The most dangerous form of jealousy is the one that wears a mask of friendship, and empaths attract it like no one else. Here's what most people completely miss about this dynamic. And trust me, once you see it, you will never unsee it again. According to Carl Jung, every person carries what he called a shadow, the parts of themselves they refuse to acknowledge. Now here's where it gets critical. When someone encounters an empath, someone who lives authentically, who radiates genuine warmth, who moves through the world with emotional honesty, it activates that shadow violently. The empath doesn't do anything wrong. Their very existence becomes a mirror. And what the other person sees reflected back isn't the empath. It's everything they've failed to become. Jung called this shadow projection, and it's absolutely devastating in its precision. The jealous individual doesn't see your kindness as kindness. They see it as a personal accusation. Your generosity doesn't inspire them, it torments them. Your emotional depth doesn't draw them closer. It reminds them of their own emptiness. And instead of confronting that emptiness, they do what Jung predicted they would do. They tried to extinguish the source of the reflection. But here's where the psychology becomes truly chilling. According to Jung's work on the collective unconscious, envy operates beneath the surface of conscious awareness. The person who is jealous of you rarely knows they're jealous. They genuinely believe they're being rational. They convince themselves that you're too sensitive, too dramatic, too much. They reframe their resentment as concern. They disguise their sabotage as advice. They cloak their hostility in humor. And the empath, because of their extraordinary capacity for seeing the good in others, absorbs all of it without recognizing the source. This is what Jung called psychic contamination, and it's slowly destroying empaths everywhere. Listen carefully to what happens next, because this is the mechanism no one talks about. Carl Jung discovered that empaths function as what he termed emotional containers. They unconsciously absorb the unprocessed emotions of those around them. Now imagine what happens when the emotion being projected onto them is pure, concentrated envy. The empath begins to feel inexplicably heavy. They doubt themselves without reason. They shrink. They dim their own light, not because anything is wrong with them, but because they've internalized someone else's shadow without realizing it. Jung had a specific term for this process. He called it participation mystique, a primitive psychological bond where one person's unconscious bleeds into another's. And for empaths, this bond is dangerously amplified. But here's where everything turns, and this is the part that will completely reshape how you protect yourself. According to Carl Jung's theory of individuation, there comes a critical moment when the empath begins to distinguish between their own emotions and the emotions that have been deposited into them by others. Jung called this the separation of the vessels, and it changes everything. The empath starts to notice patterns. The friend who only calls when they need something but disappears during your victories. The colleague who subtly undermines your ideas while praising you publicly. The family member whose compliments always carry a hidden sting. These aren't random behaviors. Jung understood them as systematic shadow projections from people who cannot tolerate your wholeness because it highlights their fragmentation. And what Jung discovered next is absolutely game-changing. Carl Jung observed that when an empath begins to recognize covert jealousy for what it is, a profound alchemical process begins. He called it the nigredo, the blackening, the painful but necessary stage where illusions burn away. The empath stops making excuses for people who consistently diminish them. They stop rationalizing cruelty as misunderstanding. They stop believing that if they just love harder, the dynamic will shift. It won't. Jung knew this. And the awakened empath finally knows it too. Here's the part that will send chills through you. According to Jung, the jealous individual is trapped in what he called an unconscious identification with the inferior function. They cannot grow because they refuse to face their own inadequacy. So they do the only thing their psyche allows. They attempt to reduce you to their level, not through honest confrontation, never that, but through erosion, through subtle invalidation, through emotional withdrawal disguised as maturity, through whisper campaigns dressed as concern for your well-being. But the empath who has reached psychological awareness becomes immune to this erosion, and that immunity terrifies the covert jealous individual to their core. Carl Jung said that consciousness is the greatest agent of change. When the empath becomes conscious of the jealousy surrounding them, the entire power dynamic collapses. They stop feeding the dynamic with their energy. They stop performing smallness to make others comfortable. They stop apologizing for their gifts. Jung called this the reclamation of projected power, and it is absolutely magnificent to witness. The empath doesn't confront the jealous person with anger. They don't need to. They simply stop participating in the unspoken contract that required them to dim themselves. They shine, fully, unapologetically. And the people who were feeding off their diminishment either transform or remove themselves. Both outcomes serve the empath. And here's the final insight that ties everything together. According to Carl Jung, light does not exist to apologize for the shadows it casts. The empath's radiance is not the problem. It was never the problem. The problem lies in those who refuse to do their own psychological work and instead project their unlived potential onto someone who had the courage to live theirs. Jung discovered that the individuated empath, the one who has recognized and released the burden of other people's jealousy, becomes something extraordinary. Not hardened, not cynical, but discerning. They learn to protect their light without extinguishing it. They learn to love without abandoning themselves. They learn what Jung called the sacred art of selective vulnerability, opening only to those who have earned the privilege. The empath's light was never a weakness. It was always a catalyst. And those who respond with jealousy reveal nothing about the empath and everything about their own unfinished shadow work. Carl Jung understood that the greatest burden of the sensitive soul is not feeling too much. It is being surrounded by those who feel too little and resent them for the contrast. But the empath who understands this truth, who stops carrying the weight of other people's envy, who reclaims their right to shine without guilt, becomes what Jung called psychologically sovereign. And sovereignty, once claimed, can never be taken away. This is the psychology of the empath's burden. And once you understand it, you will never again mistake your light for the reason others choose darkness. Your radiance is not your wound, it is your power. And the jealousy it attracts is not your burden to carry. It never was.